Hi, lovebugs. Welcome to another episode of Girls Night with Carly Dockstader. I'm your host, Carly Dockstader, and this week we are talking all about child-parent relationships, our relationships with our parents as adults. And I wanted to talk about this topic because I feel like there's this really big trend of people blaming their parents for all of their issues, right? Which is totally like not fair. And I will dive into that in a little bit and you'll understand why after listening to this episode, why you cannot blame your parents for all of the shitty things that are happening into your life. So there's a lot of things that go into that, obviously, a lot of moving parts, a lot of reasons why people want to blame their parents in the first place. And I think with healing, you can kind of fall into that trap for a little bit, right? Like you want to see yourself as this person that is healing, that's doing all this work, and it's their fault. They did this. That's the reason I'm this way. But I mean, you get to another level of it and you realize like, no, I need to take responsibility for myself. And that's why this is kind of a side tangent, but that's why I'm such a firm believer in radical responsibility. So in other words, just I always love to look at what my role is in my own suffering. So I invite you to do that as well, because in every instance, there is something that we are also doing to contribute to our own suffering in a certain matter, especially if it is prolonged suffering. Hi everyone! Life can get a little crazy, so let's talk about it. If you're ready to dive deeper, talk about what really matters, and feel a little more empowered, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Carly Dockstader. I'm a life coach, baker, dog mom of 2, and you're always there for you gal pal. And I'm so excited to have you join me. So grab your fuzzy socks, put on your comfy pants, and let's have girls' night. I'm going to go ahead and get into it. I first and foremost want to talk about the complexities of a child-parent relationship. Obviously, this is complex. It kind of changes and morphs throughout our lives. So I'm going to talk about a few of the stages that we tend to go through here. Essentially, our parents shape us in really deep, unconscious ways, right? Both positively and negatively. And so when we are kids, first and foremost, young childhood, early childhood, we see our parents as these all-knowing, infallible figures who define everything about us. They are our primary source of safety, of love, and of learning. We just see them as these amazing beings, right? Our parents are essentially God to us when we are children. And we have a very natural need for approval and validation from our parents that shapes how we perceive ourselves, both in childhood and in adulthood, for obvious reasons. Then when we move into our adolescence, this is when we start seeing our parents as flawed people, just like they are, over these perfect authority figures that we used to see them as when we were young children. So in our adolescence, we start to push for our own independence. This is when we're learning more and exploring more about who we are. So on one hand, we're pushing for this independence for ourselves while still craving the support and love from our parents. So this can lead to conflict both internally and between the child and the parent, because our parents' rules at this stage in our lives, our parents' perspectives, our parents' values and morals may start to feel restrictive because we're starting to learn, oh, I might not actually agree with that. So this could cause resentment, this could cause rebellion. This is what people are talking about when they're talking about cranky teenagers, right? Truly, I believe that that's just people learning who they are in relation to who they've been told to be up to this point. And then after that, typically, as young adults, we start to kind of redefine the relationship that we have with our parents, because at this point, we've experienced a little bit of life on our own, and we kind of begin to understand the different pressures that our parents were feeling, probably the limitations that they had, the struggles that our parents might have faced. So because we're starting to experience that ourselves as young adults, we're more able to empathize with our parents and their choices, even if we don't necessarily agree with them. And then on the other hand, there still might be some of this unresolved childhood trauma, these wounds that start to surface because we are more aware of what that actually means. So this again could take you to another stage of resentment or to a stage of needing to establish boundaries with your parents. And personally, I feel like these are all really good things to do, right? As an adult, as a young adult, you should have boundaries with your parents. And if you don't, that probably is part of the reason that you resent your parents. So we'll get into that a little bit later. And then obviously, as you get into adulthood, as you become a parent yourself, that's going to bring you different lessons as well and different perspectives as well. I'm not going to dive too much into that here, but I just wanted to go kind of through our childhood experiences because that is the main part that our parents have a impact on, because as I said, especially when we're young children, we see our parents as all knowing. So when our parents have a certain perspective of us or of the world, we tend to take that on as our own opinion. And so that can obviously influence some major things about ourselves. So our attachment styles, if you have not heard about attachment styles, usually people are using attachment styles in terms of romantic relationships, but I think it appears in all sorts of relationships. So I'm not going to dive too deep into it. There's anxious, secure, avoidant, and disorganized attachment. I'll attach a book link here. Attached is what it's called. If you want to dive deeper into that, because that can be a whole nother episode, but they influence that. They influence our emotional regulation. So how we're able to calm ourselves down, how we're able to relate to other people, how we're able to have empathy for other people, how we process and handle our emotions. And also they influence our belief system. So our religious beliefs, our political beliefs, our familial beliefs, all of those kinds of things, our parents have a really big influence on when we're kids. So for obvious reasons, I can see why people kind of fall into this trap of blaming their parents when things don't turn out exactly how they wanted them to turn out, right? And this isn't about saying that if you had bad experiences as a child, this is not about saying that those experiences did not matter, because they obviously matter. They influenced who you are. And acknowledging how those experiences shaped you is completely necessary. But what is not necessary is staying stuck in them by blaming your parents. Because when you're stuck in blame, that's preventing you from growing because you are staying in a victim mindset. So there is this really beautiful analogy that I heard from Jay Shetty about this exact thing. This analogy originally was in terms of a romantic relationship rather than a parental relationship. So I'm going to attach that clip in here because he says it so much better than I ever could. But after that, I'm going to take it a little bit further so you guys understand how I relate this to your child-parent relationship.
There's this beautiful poem that I came across, and I've never been able to find it again. But it was this concept that when you're growing up, you're raised by your parents and your family, and you start constructing your house out of bricks. And the house you build independently has some holes in it, it has some broken bricks, and it has some perfect bricks. The bricks you got from your parents, some of them are broken. Some of them have loads of gaps in those walls. But you've been constructing a house. And that person that you end up deciding to spend your life with, they've got a similar home that they've been building. And when we end up meeting someone, we often want them subconsciously to come and live in our house.
Right.
So we want them to leave their broken home behind and come and live in our broken home, because we think the way we've been raised is right. Now, what we don't realize is that person also wants us to leave our house and go and live in their broken house. And what this poem was suggesting is actually what you need to do is pick up the best bricks that you laid at your home, and they pick the best bricks that were laid in their home, and you need to come and build a home together. And that's really what a relationship is about. It's about taking the best of what you had and find a way to construct a home together that becomes your new home. It will still be broken, it will still be incomplete.
Yeah.
But it will be a home that's together, that's yours, not a home that's individually one or the other.
So that was a beautiful analogy, right? I think he is so eloquent when he talks, and he brought the point across very clearly. So essentially, I think that this applies to our relationship with our parents too, as I mentioned, because at a certain point, when you're growing up, your parents stop handing you bricks to build your house with. And all of a sudden, you're the one that's in charge of the bricks. And I'm sorry if I'm looking down a lot. I have a lot of notes in my phone, so that's why. But at a certain point, your parents stop handing you bricks, right? All of a sudden, you are the one that's in charge of the bricks. And as we get older, we get to choose which bricks we continue building our house with. And when we see a brick that is broken or breaking or just completely crumbling apart in our house, we have the choice to either keep that brick, to repair that brick, or to completely replace that brick with a different brick that is brand new. And this is all to say, you get the choice. You can take all of the amazing and wonderful and good qualities. You can choose the good bricks to build your house with, or you can take all the nasty, broken, disintegrating pieces to build your house with. And at a certain point, it's less about your parents and more about how you're running from and lying to yourself. You have to stop blaming your parents for everything going wrong in your life, because if you are blaming them for everything that is wrong in your life, then logic only says that really you would also have to blame them for everything good that's happening in your life too. And if that's the case, if they're good for both the bad and the good, then are they really that bad? Or were they just doing the best that they could with what they had and with what they themselves were taught? And now, me saying that, that your parents are responsible for every single good thing that came into your life too, that's probably going to fire some of you guys up. It's probably going to make you angry. Like, Carly, they sure as hell are not responsible for all the good things in my life. That's my hard work. That's my sweat. That's my tears that got me here. And if that's the case, then I say good. You should feel that way, because I'm assuming you probably had a hand in the good things that happened in your life too. But if your parents are not responsible for all the good in your life, then that also means that they are not responsible for all the bad either. Because just like it's your choices that have brought you so many wonderful things, it's also your choices that brought you some really shitty things. And that's just kind of the truth of life. It's just a lot easier to blame other people, even though at the end of the day, we are the ones in charge of ourselves. At the end of the day, we're the ones in charge of the bricks. So this reminds me of the story that I heard of these two guys. So they both had a drug addict father, kind of violent, in and out of jail, kind of like not a great dude, obviously. One of the sons grew up to be just like his dad, addicted to drugs, in and out of jail, in poverty. The other son grew up to be a successful business owner, had 2 homes, a wife, 3 kids, goes on vacation every year. And when they asked the drug addict son why his life turned out the way that it did, his response was, "Well, what did you expect? Look at who my father is." When they asked the business owner son why his life turned out the way it did, he responded, "What did you expect? Look at who my father is." And so I think that's really impactful, because in other words, you can keep the shitty bricks or you can replace them with better ones. One son decided to keep the shitty bricks and keep making shitty bricks. The other son decided to replace the shitty bricks with these beautiful new bricks. And obviously, yes, there are horrible parents out there. I am not denying that. Obviously, that is a truth. And yes, some of us had very hard childhoods, and some of us had very loving childhoods. Some of us had a mix of both. In fact, I would argue that all of us had a mix of both. But that's even to say that if you did have a cushy or privileged childhood, that does not make you immune to trauma. It does not make you immune to emotions or to just being human. So even if you think that someone had it way better off than you as a child, I would ask you to take a second to pause, because sure, maybe they did, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they had it the same as you. Maybe they had it even worse than you, but you guys just showed it in different ways. But either way, my position stays the same on this matter, because if you continue to blame your parents for every little thing that goes wrong in your life, then you are still letting them have power over you. And at a certain point, you get to choose differently. You get to say, you know what? How my parents treated me was fucking awful. It wasn't fair and it sucked. And guess what? My parents don't get to have control of me anymore, because I choose differently now, because I see what I am worth and I see how valuable I am. And quite frankly, those parents who are awful parents, one, I do believe that they were doing the best with what they could, and you guys can argue with me about that if you want to, but I really do believe that people are doing the best that they can with what they're given. And quite frankly, those parents that are just awful parents, they missed out because they never truly got to meet the person that you are and the person that you're meant to be because they were too wrapped up in their own pain to see anything differently. But guess what? You do. You do get to meet that person. You get to meet the person that you were always meant to be. You get to meet that version of yourself if you let that happen. It is not your job to heal your parents, but it is your job to heal you. And you have the choice to do that now. And here's the thing, too. Like, we tend to expect other people to give us so much more grace than we ourselves tend to extend to other people. So if you're expecting grace and empathy and forgiveness and love from your parents, maybe you should take a second to try to extend the same sort of grace and empathy and love and kindness back to them. And truly, now that you're an adult, you have the ability to actually talk to your parents about it. You have the ability to tell them how they're impacting you. Tell them what you need. Tell them how you most need to be loved by them. And sure, maybe that conversation will feel a little awkward at first, but still try it. And I'm going to give you an example of this. So there was one time when my brother and his girlfriend were going through a rough patch. Well, ex-girlfriend at this point now, but they were going through a rough patch, and I was just a little concerned. I like to keep an eye on all those types of things. So my brother and my dad worked together, and so I asked my parents when I was visiting there one day. I just told them, I was like, I'm a little concerned. Will you keep an eye on him just in case? Just because they're around him so much more than I ever was. So obviously they were going to know his patterns better than I do. And that conversation kind of transformed into a slightly different conversation where I mentioned that like they could focus on telling him that he was doing a good job, actively going out of their way to tell him that he's doing a good job, to tell them that they were proud of him more often. I mean, that was true for me too. And their response to that was, well, of course we're proud of you. You kids know that you're doing a good job. And I want to point out that that was not dismissive on their part at all. More so to them, it is just a clear as day fact that we're all doing a good job. But my response to that was, well, no, we still need to know sometimes. We still need to hear it from you sometimes, because sometimes it doesn't feel like we're doing a good job. And ever since then, ever since I chose to be vulnerable with my parents have randomly told me, both my mom and my dad, how proud they are of me, how much they love me, how much I'm doing a good job. And all it took was a conversation. I got exactly what I needed from them. I didn't have to feel all of this pressure that I was putting on myself anymore. And they actually know what I need in order to feel that love from them. And sometimes, just like in this example, they didn't even know, right? Maybe they don't even know that you need to be loved differently because that's just how it's been this whole time, and it doesn't even cross their mind to do it differently or that you need something differently. And this all leads back to the concept that you can't expect other people to read your mind. You have to tell them, and you have to remind them more than once, most likely, that you need something different, right? Because sometimes our brains are resistant to change. But someone who cares about you will make an effort to change. Even if it's in little tiny ways at first, they will make that effort. But in order for that effort to happen, the first step is in you being brave and being honest about what you need with them. And just like this is true for romantic relationships or friendships, the same is true for your relationship with your parents. You need to be open and honest with them about what you need from them in order to feel loved. For me personally, one of the best things that has ever happened to me is watching my parents become grandparents. It has brought out such a loving, attentive, caring side of them. And every time I see them with their grandkids, I can't help but think how that's probably the way that they were with us too, but we were just a little bit too small, a little bit too little to remember that. And there's such a full circle beauty in seeing that kind of love play out from an outside perspective as a third party. It just, so many things have clicked for me watching my parents in this dynamic in this way. And once I become a parent myself, I'm not right now, obviously, I'm sure that there will be even more moments of clarity for me in that aspect. All of this is to say, if you don't find a way to set your ego aside, that's something you might miss out on. And speaking from experience, that would be such a shame to miss out on such a big blessing, like being able to see your parents become grandparents. So if you're in a rough patch with your parents, or maybe you've always been in a rough patch with your parents, maybe just see if there's a way for you guys to repair it together. Because I am a firm believer that any relationship can be fixed if both parties are willing to try. The key word there is that like both people have to be willing to make a change, right? You can't force somebody to change because it takes compassion and empathy and understanding and setting boundaries and more than likely a lot of forgiveness and a lot of accountability and probably more than a few arguments. But I believe that in the end, if two people are willing to do what it takes to repair a relationship, then that relationship will be repaired. And your relationship with your parents is included in that. Obviously, be accountable for your own well-being here. If your parents are just completely narcissistic, abusive, whatever, like be accountable for your own well-being. But if maybe you just have kind of a poor relationship with your parents for whatever reason, and you haven't tried really to repair it, or you haven't tried to even reflect on why it might be that way or what your part of that might be, then just try, maybe give it a shot. Maybe ask your parents and be vulnerable with them with about what you need and how they're hurting your feelings and see what happens. Because at the end of the day, this is your life to live, and you are the one responsible for the way that it turns out, regardless of your childhood or not. So yeah, I think that's all I have for y'all, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic. So shoot me a DM, mention it in the comments. But other than that, I will see you guys next week. Love you. Bye. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked what you heard, then go ahead and subscribe so you get updates with us every week. You can also follow us on Instagram at KRC Coaching. If you're interested in working one-on-one, then go ahead and visit our website, krccoaching.com, to book your first 30-minute session for free. All right, thanks so much, you guys. Love you. Bye.